Here we go.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our live Facebook chat today. We are celebrating the publishing of Land of 10,000 Plates. I'm Stephanie Hansen. I am the host of Weekly Dish and author of Stephanie's Dish, a blog where I write about food and lifestyle stuff. And I'm here with my radio partner, Stephanie March.
Hi, and I am also co-host of Weekly Dish with Stephanie Hansen. And I am also the senior food editor for Minneapolis-St. Paul magazine. And we are so excited because one of our very frequent listeners and clearly loyal fans is with us, Patrice Johnson, who has written this spectacular book, The Land of 10,000 Plates, who, by the way, Patrice, I don't know if you know this, but we previewed the fall cookbook list. And as we were clicking through the list, we were just like, and here's this. I'm like, oh, this one looks like a tater tot hot dish. And then I was like, wait a minute, it's Patrice. And so we had our own little freak out because you made this huge national list of cookbooks to watch for fall. So congratulations on that. And congratulations on your book.
Thank you. It's an honor. Yeah, it's been a ride, and here we are.
Patrice, were you working on the book this whole year? Tell us about the trajectory and where COVID really interrupted.
So let's see. I pitched it a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, and then started working on it. Last summer, fall. I can't remember when I started it. What day is it? Right?
Yeah, nobody knows.
So it took exactly a year to finish it. So I think we started at the end of winter, and then it was due early February this year. And it was so strange because a lot of the stories are my husband and my friends, and I go to different places in Minnesota and experience these different food traditions and food rituals. And as soon as the book was done, there's no way I could have written it after that, because so many of those really cool, awesome rituals are not happening right now.
No, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But let's talk a bit. So let's frame this up. So Land of 10,000 Plates is this really great Minnesota cookbook that is really more than a cookbook. It's sort of a compendium of stories and recipes, and it really is a cultural. It's a cultural storytelling through food, is what it is.
Yeah.
And
food's the best way to tell a story.
Yeah, and I just to kind of get everybody's set of how we're kind of talking about this today. It's great because interwoven with each story, each recipe is sort of Patrice's way of talking about, why hot dish is important to her, or the state, why we do booyah, why there's crayfish boils, all these kind of things. And I think for me, one of the things I love the most about it is it's sort of this is the explainer we've been waiting for, to get send this out into the country so that they finally can maybe get it about who we are, right?
Yeah, that was my hope too. And just because I love Minnesota so much, and I love everything about our state, and I love celebrating Minnesota and celebrating our people. So it was such an honor to get to go out and actually meet new people and see what they were doing and why these rituals were important to them. I'd never been to a booyah before last year.
What?
Is that the saddest thing ever?
Okay, I'm just gonna preface the fact that the booyah is what I made today.
Yes.
I have a little bit of booyah action happening in my soup cup here.
Oh, very nice.
I did a mini booyah on my stove. Yeah. Because what, Hansen?
Explain the booyah, because people don't know.
Well, so I was going to say, if we wanted to get into booyah later, because we kind of want to work through the book a little bit, it's okay. I just want to say, I'm tease you right now with that. Because
very nice.
I know.
Very nice.
I know. But let's actually set up the book, because let's talk about the way it's set up, because I think that is really important. The fact that you have really set it up. What I love most is that you set it up seasonally, and you even say that in your introduction that in the North, we mix our food rites with seasons, and this mix tells a compelling and occasionally quirky story. And tell us a little bit about why you chose the sections that you did.
I think when I pitched the book I didn't really have that idea in mind
Oh, really?
about the seasonal. And when I pitched it, I also didn't include a lot of the memoirs kind of stuff, those stories. And when our editor, Shannon, came back to me and said, yeah, we're kind of interested, but we'd really like more nostalgia. And both of us understood that I hadn't really focused enough on how this thing was going to get laid out. And so that really helped me to say, yeah, okay, seasons will work because Minnesota is all about seasons and climate. And my whole reason for wanting to document these rituals was because I'm so worried about global warming and climate change and losing our fundamental way of life here in Minnesota, and the people who make our food, prepare our food, grow our food, harvest our food, are really feeling that impact. So what was the question? So
the way that you sectioned it off, like the first one is life
Yeah.
beneath the snow, and then
Yes.
did you have all these recipes and you had to like fit them into these seasons? Consider the radish would be spring, lazy heat would be summer, and it ain't over till the state fair would be fall, I assume.
Yes.
So did you have to like sort of work into it, or did it naturally sort of fall in?
It naturally fell into place. It really did. And at first I was worried that, I'm going to have too much spring or too much fall. But I think it just sort of said, oh no, this is the natural sort of flow.
I have to say, what primarily got me interested in food initially was I read a memoir cookbook. I read a cookbook by Jacques Pepin. I read Ruth Reichel's, what was it? Something
Comfort Me
about
with apples.
Yes. Apples.
Oh, yes.
Comfort Me with Apples. And I would read these stories and I would read the memoir pieces of these cookbooks. And it really got me interested in thinking about food and my own family and how important food was in our rituals and in our holidays. And can I just read one sentence of the cookbook that for me, it like frames up the whole cookbook, and it happens to be from the State Fair chapter. And it just said, Dad smoked Winston's. And on hot days when he wore his t-shirt to wash the Pinto, he rolled a pack up in his shirt sleeve. That day he took me to my first Minnesota State Fair, and he had a pack tucked into his shirt pocket, a nicotine pocket protector. Like I felt like I totally knew that dad, knew your dad. I could picture who he was, what it felt like. I really thought the stories in here were so beautiful and so sweet.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a special chapter to write. Yeah.
I feel like your dad was like every dad.
In many ways. In many ways, yes.
So did you pull these stories, like for instance, that come along with your recipes? Was it more, I mean, like, I kind of want to know, was it the chicken or the egg? Was it the story first? Did you think about, tater tot hot dish and then talk about things? Or, was it more like, there was an idea that you knew you wanted to feature a tater hot or a hot dish. So then, those kind of things, which came first for the most part? I'm sure it wasn't all the same.
Yeah, that's a good question. I started with the frame. So I knew some of the rituals that I wanted to talk about, meat raffles, butterheads, hot dish, pizza farm. So these were sort of like the frame of the puzzle. And then I just kind of filled in the other pieces. And so when I knew I wanted to talk about pizza farms, I knew that the pizza farm I featured would more than likely have a recipe to contribute. So that's sort of how those got filled in.
Okay.
And then with the memoir stuff, I just thought a lot about memories from growing up that had to do with food. And then, of course, the recipes I have. As I was looking through the book when it came last week, I was shocked at how many of my mom's recipes were in the book, and we hadn't even discussed it. I was like, oh gosh, this is great. It's a tribute to my mom, not just Minnesota, but it's her as well. So it's kind of fun to represent her voice through food.
Yeah.
There's a whole section in here that I thought was surprising, which was about Japan, because you lived in Japan. And how old were you when you lived there?
19 to 21,
Okay, so
my
some-
wicked youth.
yeah, kind of
Ooh.
formative years. And you like literally the slow cooker pulled turkey recipe is followed on the next page by the Japanese curry rice Minnesota style. So I love that there was a lot of diversity in the cookbook too, that it wasn't just like some of the standards like the tater tot hot dish, though that is
Right.
there too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I wanted people that don't live here say, oh, Minnesota's a white place. But I've never seen Minnesota as a white place. I've seen our diversity. And I'm one of those people that believes that there is strength in diversity, whether it is the flowers and the vegetables you're planting in your garden or the people that live in your neighborhood. So I was really pleased that there was a chance to sort of show that in this book.
I can't look past Orange Crush barbecue sauce. Why did you feel like that was going to make it into the cookbook? You have it amongst the orange push-up Jell-O shots and during the 4th of July. Are you a big 4th of July patriotic food person?
I'm a I actually think 4th of July is one of the most romantic holidays because because of fireworks. But my family always, well, when I was growing up, the town we lived in, Gaylord, always had a big 4th of July celebration. They don't any longer. And it's one of my sister's birthdays. So all of that was wrapped up into what the 4th of July means to me, to my family, to the town where I grew up, had many years growing up. And Orange Crush, in the book, I tell the story of how during this big celebration in Gaylord, there was a ring toss. And you guys remember that game where you toss the ring onto all the bottles?
Yeah.
Glass bottles. And if you get the ring over the bottle, you get the pop. And we didn't get pop in my family. We got pop for the 4th of July. We got pop for the Springfield trip in school. And if we were lucky enough to go to a family reunion, we got pop at the reunion. So I knew if I could win the 4th of July ring toss, I'd have an extra pop. And so my favorite pops were Orange Crush and well, that is my favorite pop. And I also loved root beer. So I thought, well, what a great way to represent the 4th of July ring toss with Orange Crush barbecue sauce. And it's quite tasty. It's very, very celebratory.
So were these some of these recipes that you made up for the book in particular?
Some, yes. Yes, a lot of them, like the ones that I pulled from my mom, I might have like tweaked them a little bit. A couple of them I made up just because I needed a recipe, like we talked about this on your show on Saturday. I needed a recipe with walleye in it, and so that's where the walleye macaroni and cheese recipe came from. So there are recipes in there that I needed to fill a specific food or season.
I want to talk about competitive souping because this is a thing. We are in soup season, to be clear. And before we get to discussions about Booyah, I kind of want you to tell the story of competitive souping because I think it's such a great story.
Well, I know in the book, there's sort of these two stories that I offer up. And one of them is a woman I work with. I'd heard through the grapevine that she had won this chili contest. And it was really exciting. And I didn't really know her because she had just moved onto our team. And everybody was like, you know, she's one of those, her reputation is really amazing. And so if you get to like even hang out with her, it's like I'm at the cool kids table.
Yeah.
So I was like, Joanna, I heard you won this chili contest and I'd really love to talk to you about it. And she said, sure. And so she gave me the recipe, and just hearing her story about this chili contest in St. Paul.
Yeah.
Sort of, you know, when you hear a word that you're not really familiar with, but then you hear it and then you start hearing it in conversations. Yeah. So after I had this conversation with Joanna, I started hearing soup contests. And then my editor at the Gaylord Hub, I write a column for their weekly paper. She said, you know, we're having a soup contest next month. You should really come. And I was like, oh, well, this is just perfect kismet, right? So yeah, then we went to that soup contest, and that was fantastic. And in fact, a family friend won that contest, and her daughter got second place, and both of their soups are in the cookbook as well.
So tell us about the soup that became a big hit on our show that we got a lot of questions about, was the Reuben soup.
Yes, Don's recipe. And it's great because, it kind of, what a Reuben is, what a sandwich is, what's in it. And then to like repurpose the idea and make it into a soup is just brilliant. And it's really tasty. And the rye croutons alone, like I could eat them like popcorn watching a movie. They're so tasty. Really, it's a fun way to make soup.
Did you create that recipe, or is that from someone?
No, that's Don's. That's Don's recipe.
Okay.
Yep, that won the soup contest in Gaylord in Sibley County.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Do you think people outside of Minnesota are aware of how often we gather in a room with crock pots and then judge each other? And this is what I want people to understand. Like in Minnesota, this is serious competition. And I know that you're talking about Kevin Caulfield. He's one of my favorite potters, and at the Northern Pottery, the Clayworks, where he does this every year. But this is more than just like hipsters doing their favorite chili thing. This happens. I judged a crock pot soup contest last year in this conference room at this and it was like banks. It was like bank people. And they were so legitimately completely into this. They were watching me taste things. And I was like, look, this is an afternoon at your office. We're okay.
A lot of offices do it. They have cookbook, or they have crock pot competitions. It is Crocktober after all, right?
I mean, if it must be, I guess it must be.
Well, that's another great thing about living here, right? I wonder if part of that, our competitive nature, is because we pretend we're so humble in Minnesota, but really we're not.
No,
no, that's Minnesota nice is a sarcastic label.
Exactly.
That's what nobody gets. They're like, you guys are so nice. We're like,
No, we're not.
No,
and we're going to talk behind your back as soon as you leave the room. Did you taste her soup?
No, it was interesting. Your soup is really, it's interesting.
Oh, yeah, she's different.
That's different. I wish we had a whole chapter on that's different. Seriously. Okay, let's talk about booyah because I really want to eat some of my booyah. So,
good.
You have not had you said you had never been to a booyah until last year.
Yeah,
so
it was my first.
What they were. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what they are and how you discovered them?
A booyah is typically a fraternal organization will get together the day before they serve the booyah, and every community or every organization that does this has their own recipe. It's always a secret. Only one or two people actually can know the secret, and
yes,
booyah is spelled for everyone.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Very nice.
And they would normally sell a bowl or a quart, or a lot of places I know where my boss goes, she brings her crock pot, and they actually fill her crock pot for a particular price. And it's usually a couple different meats. You got a chicken, you got a pork, you got a beef, lots of different vegetables. Some folks put barley in theirs, and it's yeah.
I got barley in mine. So the whole thing with booyah, it's been going on, in the Twin Cities area, in the Minnesota, in the north, and you'll find it in other regions as well. But it's since 1935, the Northeast Minneapolis or North St. Paul, Firemen's Association. I think they have the earliest noted booyah, but the biggest thing is that it's like a communal soup, right?
Yeah.
It's not just I made a recipe. It's I threw whatever we all decided is our secret recipe into a giant kettle pot, and we cooked it for 30 hours, and there's dudes who stay up all night watching the booyah,
And there's special spoons, right?
Oh,
big
and paddles and this
an oar, a boat oar to stir.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so they come together, and I think that this is something that, is this thing that we almost took for granted. We didn't talk about it really, about how there are booyahs, and they're mostly fundraisers. It's all good deed doing, right?
Exactly.
And it's such a beautiful thing. I'm so glad you finally got to one.
Me too.
I know.
And then again, a person I work with happens to be part of this family who's been doing them for almost 100 years, and they're actually featured in the book. Yeah, start seeing booyah.
Well, and so I have to just tell you about my booyah because I basically the idea is that usually take like an oxtail and you've got soup bones and you've got all this great stuff in there. For me personally, I love the idea of looking at someone's booyah recipe and thinking about how I can incorporate it. But mine is sort of like the way that whatever's in the kitchen and whatever's in the fridge is. So I have like
that looks beautiful.
Yeah, and I got brown, and I threw the last of the carrots that I roasted last week in there. So I just sort of make it a stone soup of my. There's some chickpeas. I've never put chickpeas in here before, but here they are.
That's a great idea.
We all have cans of chickpeas from our pandemic shopping, right? Yeah. All these random beans that we're trying to figure out what to do with them now.
Yeah, 2 bags of lentils.
So many lentils.
Yeah, so many lentils.
So many lentils.
So many lentils and so little time.
There's always time for lentils. Those things will be good forever.
True.
I tell you what. I love that you also, this is also sort of a throwback thing, and I'm sort of celebrating the throwback stuff because I think that they're not really documented for people to make them at home as much. We talk about them and I write about them and all this stuff, but we don't really get into the making of them at home necessarily. And the other one I liked was the commercial sandwich.
Yay!
I mean, that's one of those things that you see out at diners, but I don't think people think, hey, I'm going to make myself a hot beef, mashed potato, gravy sandwich.
A lot of these recipes in here are super comfort foody. Like you have the Swedish meatball recipe, you have a pumpkin pie, pumpkin lasagna. There's a lot of like hearty recipes, but also in some respects, some of them are like a little twist on things that might be things that your mom made that you've maybe updated just a little bit.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Strawberry cherry pretzel jello salad is kind of one of those. I'm sorry. I just have to say, I never thought of any of those ingredients until somebody made it at work one day because we were all just ripping on it. And it was oddly good.
The pretzel salad?
Yes, because the salty and the sweet and the texture, because jello is just kind of weird, right? But all of that together, it is kind of a delicious sort of weird thing to eat.
I did make jello shots for the occasion as well tonight.
Nice.
Look at that
nice
glass.
That requires the patented swoop and toss. I mean,
I know.
You have to swoop it because you got to let it loose.
That's
I will at the end. No.
Swooping.
You got to swoop.
And this one actually, this recipe is not in the book. I actually made this for, if anyone's familiar with Oyster Fest, with Radishes this weekend. I made this with a lemon aquavit and lemon jello. And then this recipe is actually in the book. It's candied lemon peel.
Oh, that's so nice. I want people to know about you too. I don't even know when you told me this, but it must have been maybe when we first met you about your love of radishes. And, you know, we all, what are those things called? They call them horsebacks, the bacon wrapped water chestnuts.
Oh, devil on a horseback?
Devil on a horseback.
Yeah.
So you have kind of a version of that, but with your favorite, the radish that's roasted, that are wrapped in bacon. Roasted radishes are very underrated, people.
Oh, radishes in general,
Yes. Yeah, I am all about it. I'm all year on eating those. I don't care. Just give them up.
Yep.
Yeah, and if you're someone that likes roasted vegetables, like a roasted radish, it completely changes the complexity of the radish, and it's not really peppery at all. It's almost more like a roasted potato.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's delicious.
Yeah. I do. And I'm just a purist in that idea of having it be salt and butter. Now, you did include, I mean, like, it's funny that you have the Dayton's popovers in here, right? I mean, that is such a funny thing, but I feel like that's like such a very specific segment of our culture because there's people who remember it, but there's people who would never even know that that's a thing, the Dayton's popovers.
Yeah. But it's an important thing.
I think so.
And nobody does them better.
No. I was telling Patrice before we got on the call, she writes in here about St. Anthony, Maine's America Pie pizza dough because she worked there and I worked at Dayton's.
Okay, can I have a question? I don't remember St. Anthony, Maine.
No, I didn't either.
Like, I remember
this was in the 80s.
But I don't remember the pizza place.
Yeah, it was in the 80s. And
Yeah.
So you know where the food hall was in the basement. You remember Thieves Market, and then there was like the grocery store deli, and then you walked in and there was Dino's and Prince Street Bar. Right next to that, between Prince Street and Haagen-Dazs, is where pizzeria was.
On St. Anthony, Maine.
Yep, right down in the middle of it all. Yeah, it was.
Was that when Mississippi Live was there?
No, it was before.
Yeah.
That was horrible.
Yeah.
Right.
I worked for the company that ran that. How weird is that? Such a small world.
It is.
Oh, God.
You've got the whole state fair chapter here is really sweet too, and you do a good job of the deep fried cheese curds. And one thing you talk about, when I was a kid, the like after school meal was kind of the big meal, because that was the meal that like I cooked for myself because it was the meal we had before the actual dinner time.
Mm-hmm.
So you talk about back to school biscuits. Like this is where I did most of my formative baking and figuring out what worked. Tell me about your back to school biscuits and why you included them.
So I've got 4 older sisters, and when the oldest 2 left home, graduated, went off to school and to adult life, they're the 3 youngest of us left at home. And at that time, we moved to Worthington, Minnesota, and my mom started working away. The first time she worked away from home, and so we were latchkey kids. And my sisters, I wasn't allowed to cook anything because I was too young, but my sisters could cook. So, and we never had junk food. We never had pop. We never had junk food. So they would root around and find something that they could make that would be a delicious, tasty after-school treat. And so my mom would keep a big Tupperware of biscuit mix, the homemade biscuit mix. And so my sisters would, ration out a little bit of that and make biscuits and hot chocolate usually. And that would be like the best after-school snack. So it's almost like if Bisquick comes, all prepared in a little box. This was like my mom's homemade version.
Yeah. That's how my husband learned to make meringues. Exact same story. No sugar in the house. Mom went back to work looking for a treat and figured out he could whip up these meringues.
That is such a hard thing to do.
That is really impressive.
Like, how do you, that was the thing you decided to make? And it's funny, like all of our moms were like, no sugar in the house. So we were just, whatever sweet thing we could find, we were making weird stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh God. Yeah. I would like drink maple syrup.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
That seemed like that was what you're supposed to do.
Oh, and molasses. Come on. A spoonful of molasses.
That was the goods too.
Yeah. Right? It was as close to sugar as we got. Yeah. And we would babysit these kids that were never allowed to have sugar. And they would get near sugar and they would literally become like wild animals because they'd never had it before. Mm-hmm. I almost think like, let the kids have it because you get over it. And then you're just like, oh yeah, cookies and all this stuff. It's not a big deal because you could always have it.
Yeah, seriously.
Are we getting to? Is it time for the question portion? I think we're getting close.
So, Patrice, before I'm going to ask you one last question before we get close, and you guys feel free to ask us anything, or Patrice anything. We can talk about our favorites. But Patrice, I want to know what is your one favorite? Do you have a favorite recipe in the book? I know that's like picking kids, but we all get asked to do it. So is there a thing that you are so like that you love the most? Is there one?
Well, of course, because Steph March threw down the gauntlet on Saturday and said she was cooking from the book, I did too.
Oh, good.
And this is one of my favorite recipes. And this is wild rice pot pie.
Oh,
and I'm serving it with lingonberries tonight.
Oh, nice.
And this is, I think, not only just because it's really tasty, but because the story of wild rice and the Native woman I interviewed for the book.
Will you talk about that with Hope? Because I loved that story. I thought that was wonderful. Go ahead and talk about that.
Hope is every September, except for this September, Roseville Nature Center has a wild rice festival. And last year we went, and I'd wanted to talk to a native about wild ricing because I thought it was important to include in the book. And as we're doing the whole walk around the park and talk to people about ricing, this woman named Hope was like, "Hey, come and see if you can toss the, hulls out. And so we, went over to watch her do her thing. And she just had such a buoyant, positive, awesome attitude. And she was so fun to talk to. And so then I approached her about, can I interview you for this book I'm doing? And she said, sure. And so we chatted for like an hour one day. And then last January, we met again, and I showed her what I'd written. And you could tell she has been a teacher because she was like,
giving you the red line.
Yeah, I was like, oh, thank God I didn't bring a red pen. But she just, the stories that she told, I thought were really beautiful, really important. And, this is we're on borrowed land here. And I thought it was really important to let somebody tell the story in their own words of the people that actually lived here first. So hope is part of that. And of course, the wild rice story. I love wild rice. It's so delicious.
Have you ever collected it?
No, but talking to Hope about it was fascinating. Have you done it?
Well, I watched some folks do it, and they invited me to come along, and it's this, they would do it in a canoe. So they would paddle up and then shake the rice out of the patty, and then the canoe starts to fill up. And I mean, it's kind of backbreaking work. It's hard.
Yeah. And I think it's fascinating that when the rice lands in the canoe, they stand straight up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so wild.
Yep. The whole thing is just, and that you're like in a canoe that's tippy, right? And you're like able to get enough balance to get this going and to get the rice in the boat. And it was just
while the mosquitoes are swarming.
Yeah.
I love the fact that Hope says, and you recount her telling the story about it. She says, we take 1/3 for humans to eat. The birds and the animals take 1/3 to eat, and we leave 1/3 to reseed for next year. The simple, important rule, the balance of human and nature respect is the way to assure everyone has enough. And I thought I just loved that sentiment that you included that in this because it was so important, I thought.
Yeah.
I'm just going to hold the book up again because everybody wants to see the cute cover with the Minnesota Lodge pan in the background. Do you think, I thought this book really screamed gift giving because of the personal stories.
Mm-hmm.
And you got Trisha Cornell, who also has an amazing cookbook. She wrote your foreword, which I thought was really nice. Or what do you call it when it's a slug that they write?
A blurb?
A blurb.
Yeah.
A jacket blurb.
Yeah.
Her cookbook, Vegetables, Making the Most of Your Seasonal Produce, Eat More Vegetables, is one of my favorites.
Yes. Okay. We need more vegetable books.
We do need more vegetable books. Okay, speaking of, you're both, Stephanie and Patrice, in front of your wall of cookbooks. I want you to just spin around and grab one of the books that's meaningful to you and hold it up.
You want me to do it too?
Yes, Smarchie, I do. Meaningful or that you'd recommend?
Look at this. I'm going to bring something out that's a little bit derivative here.
Okay, Smarch.
The derivative is always good.
Yeah. But this is, I'm going to wait for, should she grab hers? No. Okay.
Okay. I got you.
Ready.
So mine is actually my very first Minnesota cookbook, the Minnesota Heritage Cookbook.
Very nice.
The hand-me-down recipes.
That was so amazing.
Listen, this was from a benefit for the American Cancer Society. But you understand, this is a repurchase of a book, you guys, that I had growing up. And this is my mom's. This was in the 80s. This was on my mom's bookshelf. I became the brownie queen because of this book, because there was a great recipe for brownies in here. And I just did that. But they have tomato quick bread. There's the cardamom breads. They've got, I don't even know how to say creamed fish. It's stewed de fiscafilier. And they've got sauerbraten and moussaka and all sorts of things in here that just, it was like my beginning of cooking. This book was the beginning of my cooking.
I love it. All right, Patrice, what do you have in your hand?
Okay. I got two. They were just the first ones I grabbed. Well, one I grabbed on purpose. But this book, because my friend wrote it, Chef Steve Hansen. He's amazing. He's been really inspirational in my life. I've known him for about 5 years. We cook together at his fest in Minot every year, not this year. And this is great. If you love Danish food, this is the book to get, if you can still find it. And
Those
then this.
Hansons are pretty great, I gotta tell you.
Yeah. So this book is Cooking with Style. It's the old Chicago cutlery. Do you guys remember the old Chicago cutlery?
Yes.
So my mom worked for the original Chicago cutlery people and gave this to me when I turned 18 or something, along with like the old Chicago cutlery knife set.
The wooden block, yes.
Yes, I actually learned to cook from this book.
That's it, right? Seriously,
Yeah.
the most random things.
It is. I mean, recipes I still use, like my first Shudo, my first cream puff came from this book.
Right.
My first fondue, everything is in this book. And it's like from the late 70s, early 80s, I think.
Okay, that's funny. Yeah. I love that. You guys, that was an excellent segment. So thank you for doing that. Patrice, can I ask you about fondue because you'd write about it in the book?
And make sure, let's give a second to make sure that everybody knows you guys can ask us any questions about, Patrice's book. You can ask about the recipes in the book. Send us any questions you guys want. Minnesota, anything. Okay, go with fondue.
Yes. So in the book, you write about that fondue was a special thing that you had on New Year's Eve. And that spoke to me because we've done that with our daughter. But then you write in there that you didn't know about cheese fondue till much later.
Everything was like a big vat of frying grease, right?
Yeah. Oh God, right?
Yeah. And it was wonderful because I didn't really care about the fondue itself. I cared about the dips. And so we had, the plate with the divots in it. And I would fill every single divot up with all the stuff I was going to dip my steak in. And that was the most exciting part of the entire festivity. Because I hated waiting for it to cook. I just wanted to dip it.
And you'd burn yourself with your little, because it was hot and bubbly.
Little 6-year-old hand in there.
Yeah, you could do an entire dip book. You know what I mean? Because that's definitely a Minnesota tradition to have dip.
Yes, dip is really important. Yeah.
God, seriously. Oh well. No, if we haven't, again, you guys, if we have any questions, someone wants to know about Clementine Paddleford. Is that a thing that we missed? No.
Yeah, I don't know about Clementine.
I don't know Clementine Paddleford.
I don't either.
That's a great name, though. It's kind of like
about her.
When you say, what's your stripper name? Or Clementine Paddleford.
She made all food writing possible. Okay.
Well, okay.
So we need to learn about Clementine. And she's
probably. I always thought it was MFK.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's up there. I have one of those up there too.
Yeah, exactly. Patrice, you also have a day job. So just in the practical piece of writing a cookbook, would you write on the weekends? Would you write at night? It takes a year to put these together. People don't understand how long a cookbook takes.
This is going to sound really strange, but I don't really remember writing it. Isn't that weird?
No.
Because you get in the zone and then you look back and you're like, oh, this is I wrote this. I think I wrote it on weekends, I guess. I don't, maybe my husband could answer because he's always looking at me writing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think mostly weekends. And that's when my testing would also, and any of the photos would always take place, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah. Did you test all the recipes in the book?
Yes, except for one. My friend Gary's honey potato chip sandwich. I did not test that recipe.
Just because you didn't think you'd like it?
Well, I'm sorry?
Just because you didn't think you'd like it?
No, just because I was like, if I have chips in the house, I'm going to eat them. And and I thought, well, okay, it's pretty straightforward. It's white bread, butter, honey, and potato chips.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty
I promise, Gary, I will make that someday because it does sound good. But I'm going to eat all those chips if they're in the house.
Seriously.
There is a question that came in from Stephanie, and she wanted to know, are there any recipes you wanted to include but that got cut from the book?
Yes. I interviewed the folks over at Izzy's Ice Cream.
Oh.
Yeah. And he generously, Jeff gave me their the Jello hot dish, or I'm sorry, Jello salad ice cream that was with Hamlin at the fair.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of the reason I interviewed him, was talk about the Jello salad ice cream. And I took such pains to do everything exactly, but divided by 10 or whatever, and it was absolutely hideous Pepto-Bismol pink. It tasted really good, but it was nothing like what they served at the fair. So sadly, that did not get I ate the entire thing by myself out of the ice cream maker. Mm-hmm. It was delicious, but it wasn't pretty. So that did not.
That's harsh. Yeah.
Some things are best.
Like, because I write recipes, and I'll be honest, I'm not great at it. And I'm just kind of like, and then 3 of this and 2 of that. And when you're writing a recipe, though, like, you have to be so exact that it can be recreated every single time in the exact same way.
Yeah.
And if you're an intuitive cook, a lot of people don't cook like that. So was it hard for you to kind of get those recipes in that kind of strict format?
Absolutely. That is so painful for me because I am big picture. I don't do details.
Yeah.
And that was really hard. But I was lucky that people offered to do some testing. So for some of the recipes, I was like, I'm a little too intuitive on this. Can you look at this for me? I had folks doing that. So that was very helpful.
That's really good. So a lot of these recipes come from other people, right? So do you fear like you had to adjust or, sort of modify any that you might get in trouble from someone?
Okay. Hopefully none of our congressional folks are here.
Yeah.
But I was lucky enough to be asked to judge the Congressional Hot Dish Competition in DC last year. And so we featured the 3 winning recipes, and all 3 are fantastic. But they were really, really, really hard to recreate. So I did have to do a little bit of jiggle because, like you were saying, Stephanie, if you haven't written a recipe before, it's not easy. So there's a little wiggle in there, but those are delicious recipes. So.
Was that the one where Amy Klobuchar won the contest that you judged, or who won when you judged it?
That was actually Betty, I believe, the Hmong hot dish.
Yep.
Friends Among Us. I believe that was Betty, and then Representative Omar was 2nd place.
Yep.
And Representative Dean Phillips was 3rd. And each of those hot dishes were great because they represented the flavors of new immigrant communities, which I thought was fantastic, especially at a time when there's so much rhetoric about immigration and immigrants in general. I was really pleased that those particular hot dishes were so tasty and easily won.
We've had a long summer, right? Since the murder of George Floyd, and immigration and who belongs here and who's Minnesotan, and our proverbial whiteness has just come up. And one of the things that really struck me in this cookbook was how representative it was of your experience and how your experience was diverse. You talk about your Indian friend growing up, and you have a recipe in here for roti. I first had roti in the Caribbean about 10 years ago, and it's like a tortilla wrap made from chickpea flour, and it is so delicious. And I really appreciated that about this book, that it was your experience, but that your experience wasn't just, again, tater tot hot dish. It was much more diverse than that.
Yeah, much more diverse. And in fact, we never had tater tot hot dish. Tater tots were junk food, so I did not grow up with tater tot hot dish.
No, right. Okay, we do have another question that we're going to queue up. Okay, speaking of fondue, Arlene wants to know, what is the best book on fondue?
Boy, there was a Williams-Sonoma. Remember when they had like the cookbook series, and they had a Williams-Sonoma fondue cookbook that came with the fondue pot that we bought.
Oh, yeah.
It has some good recipes in it.
Anytime a book comes with a machine, then you got to feel good about it.
Yeah, and it was like one of those smaller cookbook ones, But it was a good cookbook, so maybe you can find that. The The library our public library here in downtown Minneapolis has one of the largest cookbook collections in the country. So if you're ever looking for like specialty cookbooks or a genre or some specific type of food, they have just so many great cookbooks there. So I would encourage you to give them a shout. Because can you go to the library right now? I don't know.
Yes, and I want to give a shout out to the other most appealing and amazing cookbook library, which is at McGrath and St. Paul campus. It's right down the hallway from my office that I'm not in right now. And they have the largest, most amazing cookbook collection. And it includes our friend Beatrice Ojikangas's cookbook, part of her cookbook collection too. It's an amazing collection. So if you're ever on St. Paul campus, it is open to the public. Again, Stephanie, what are the hours? What's open? But check it out if you can.
Check your COVID rules.
Okay, we do have another question, so let's cue it up. Arlie Frost wants to know, you may have mentioned this, sorry if I missed it, but what is the first thing you ever made?
Well, Ms. Lee, one of the very first things I ever made was actually with Lee. She's a friend of mine. When we were, you know how we were talking about, there wasn't junk food in the house, so we learned to make stuff. We learned to make macaroni and cheese together because we had cheese, we had macaroni, we had milk. I think we put bacon in it. And that was the first thing either of us ever made. And it was the most delicious macaroni and cheese ever in the history of macaroni and cheese. Yeah.
And you have such fond feelings about those recipes when you first make them, right? Like French toast. I haven't made French toast in probably 20 years, but boy, when I made it as a kid, it was amazing.
Hanson, what was the first thing you remember making?
Very first thing, there was a Betty Crocker kids cookbook, and it had a wiener roll-up recipe.
Wiener roll-up. Mm-hmm.
I remember making wiener roll-ups, and they also had peanut butter and jellies that you used cookie cutters, and you kind of rolled the bread flat and cut out a star and made like tea sandwiches with peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah.
And that felt very fancy.
Now, was the wiener roll up with the biscuit stuff that comes out of the can that you pop open?
Yeah, the crescent rolls. The crescent rolls.
Yes.
Pigs in a blanket, they called it. And yeah, I remember thinking I was so fancy. That was a great cookbook for kids. They still publish it. I got it for my niece. How about you, Steph, for Patrice? First, well, we talked about Patrice. Your first thing. Steph, what was yours?
I mean, the first thing I cooked, I think was spaghetti. I mean, I think I used to take noodles and put them in pots, and then I would throw them up on the wall because I thought that was the way that you would test them.
How old were you?
Yeah, I was a latchkey kid. So then, my mom would come home and she'd be like, "Did you have pasta for dinner?" Because I'd have spaghetti noodles thrown up against the wall.
How old were you doing this stuff?
I mean, probably 5th grade, 4th grade, something like that.
Wow, advanced. Very nice.
I was making my own stuff. So I was a Biscuit girl when you're talking about biscuits, but I would like literally mix mine with water and stick it in the oven and make, I don't even know what it was, and then I just put butter on it. That's all I did. It was basically like a pancake, but not.
Yeah. Are there more questions? We can keep just rolling them through. Oh, Chris wants to know if you have a lefse recipe in the book, Patrice.
Not in this book, but there is in my first book.
Your first book is Yule Swedish. Wait.
Yeah, pull that down.
Oh, let's look.
And hold it up because it's a great book. It has tons of great holiday recipes. There's a holiday punch in there.
Yeah.
And even though lefse is not Swedish, it's Norwegian, I included a recipe in here because there's a story about how my daughter and her friends and my friends taught ourselves to make lefse.
And the lingonberries that go with it, the lingonberry jam.
Yes.
So good.
We still eat lefse every Christmas Eve. And I will say, sometimes it goes uneaten, but my mother-in-law wraps up every single piece and takes that home. She's like, "I'm taking home the lefse."
I was always jealous because I'm a German child and we don't have lefse. You know what I mean? So all my little
pretzels.
I was just going to say, you have the pretzels. Come on.
Listen, I've got enough pancakes and everything else. I'm just saying.
And if you
this is true. You have a Spam lefse pizza in this book.
Yes.
You do have a lefse to be in here.
But if you had to pick lefse or pretzel.
Oh, I pick pretzel every time.
Probably.
No,
and
100%. Yeah, no.
The recipe for the spam lefse pizza isn't for the lefse. We're using pre-made lefse in that pizza.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Good to know. Okay, what's our next question? Okay, here we go. Andrew wants to know, are there any upgraded recipes from your previous book? Are there any that make the transition?
No.
Okay.
Well, I mean, the lefse pizza probably, because there's a lefse pizza in the Yule book, and that, if you're not familiar with that, you can call it gravlax pizza or lefse pizza. It's a lefse round that we crisp in the oven, very slowly, low heat, and then spread creme fraiche and pickled cucumbers and onions, and then gravlax and caviar. And on the spam lefse pizza, we do the same thing, but instead of putting on gravlax, we put on tiny cubed spam that's been super toasted to make it, edible. And and otherwise, it's pretty much the same pizza. So yes, that is
on the spam. That's what I'm saying.
No.
There's a question from Bill Bartz. Any wild game recipes in the book?
Oh, that's a really good question. There are not.
It's kind of hard to cook.
And I don't have a hunter in my life.
Yeah.
And that's what it takes, because it is not like wild games just out there on the market. Like you have to have someone who is in your life getting you. Like my son-in-law is going hunting and he's already like, all right, so what kind of venison do you want? And I'm like,
shanks. I'm still looking for someone to get me venison shanks, because there's a recipe that I think it's in the New York Times cookbook from the 1970s for venison shanks that's apparently delicious. And I love lamb shanks. I love a beef shank, pork shank. Get the shanks, March, and we'll make something.
All right.
Oh, that'll be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have any more questions, you guys? Okay, we have one from John. Are there any booze cake recipes in your book?
Okay, you can tell when my friends are asking the questions, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, these feel like a little bit seated at this point.
Yeah, they do.
As boozy as my friends, it seems like they might be.
Oh, we're boozy. Yeah. I've been very nice. I've been known in my past life to make a lot of boozy cakes. I used to be known for making boozy chiffon cakes for birthdays at work. I don't think there are any booze cakes in this book.
But that is the next book.
Well, and there was a booze cake in Yule.
Oh, there was.
Yeah.
Any cake can be a boozy
I
cake.
was just going to say.
Booze.
It's real easy. It's real easy. Oh, okay. So Teresa wants to know, she says, tell me about Hmong hot dish.
Awesome. There are two Hmong hot dishes. The first Hmong hot dish recipe is from Chef Ye Vang. He's actually the very first interview in the book, the very first chapter. And he's one of the kind of the seeds that started this. It was both taking a documentary class and doing when I was in grad school, and then writing a piece on meat raffle, and then working with Chef Ye at the state fair with Sustaining the Countryside on their stage in the Eco Building. He made Hmong hot dish when he was doing working with us, and I was just like, oh, this is the perfect vehicle to tell our story, our cultural story. And Chef Ye was really instrumental in that. Then the second, so his hot dish is pretty much straightforward. Just swapping out what you would put in a typical tater tot hot dish with Hmong ingredients. So heavy on the pork, coconut, milk, and then some Hmong flavors and lots of root vegetables. Where the second Hmong hot dish from the Congressional Hot Dish Contest is more of a twist, where it's topped, instead of with tater tots, it's topped with crunchy wonton wrappers. I believe I describe it in the book as tasting like if egg rolls and hot dish had a baby. It would be this. It's really, really good.
That sounds delicious.
You can test drive that Hmong hot dish. He does have Union Hmong Kitchen, which next week is moving into the Republic space in 7 Quarters. And you'll be able to taste it, understand it, and then make it from your recipe. I love that.
Yes.
Patrice, we talked a little bit about some of your favorite cookbooks. Are there some places that you like to eat around town that are some of your favorites?
We're running out of time. Where do I even begin? Well, Saturday will be. I'm so excited that Meritage is opening back up. Meritage is my husband's absolute favorite place to eat in St. Paul. He loves, they have the shrimp cocktail as big as a puppy.
Yeah.
And I just think they do a fabulous job no matter what time of day you go and eat there. And I love their oyster bar. So I'm really excited that they're slowly opening back up because they have been missed. We get a lot of punch pizza takeout. I am addicted to their salad. I actually have a mimic salad in the cookbook that mimics their punch salad with a crispy prosciutto, and oh my gosh, I love that salad. I Bachelor Farmer.
I know, sad.
Yeah, really sad. Any of those, any of the Lynn Lake areas, and there. Give me a bad restaurant in the Twin Cities. They're not opening, right? I mean,
really do.
What's that? Oh yeah,
I love it.
Hey,
yeah. Let's get to 2 more recipes before we end, or 2 more questions before we go, because people have submitted some. So Stephanie McCauley wants to know, she's interested in knowing where you purchase the radishes you roast.
Well, if you're really lucky, you have a friend like I do. Our friends Neil and Diego gave us a bunch of radishes just a few weeks ago. You can get. I like getting a really nice selection of different kinds of radishes, and I know a lot of the co-ops have that selection. Sometimes you can find them at your Kowalski's. Although I think that and like Whole Foods, but I really think the co-ops have a great selection. Farmers Market, obviously. But I think the best ones I've seen are, at the co-ops over in Minneapolis.
Yep.
That's good. All right. One more question. We have.
Bum, bum, bum.
That was fast. What's next?
What's
the pie?
I think we're all sort of struggling with that question right now. What is our food scene going to look like in a month, in 6 months, in 2 years? And when you think about cookbooks or writing about food, for me, it's been, 2.5, 3 year sort of trajectory after Yule. So I'm really kind of struggling with that. I had my chick lit novel has been kind of on the peripheral. It's called Cow Patty, and it's about this aging dairy princess. and she calls to me often, but I kind of think she might be 10 years too late. I'm not. I'm hoping that I'll get something speak to me about the next adventure. There's going to be one. I just don't know what it is yet.
Right. Someone was telling me recently that we're all experiencing surge overload. And that we're so at our capacity for change, for resilience, for pivoting, that it's like, if you can get 1 thing done in a day, that's great. 2 things is like, whoa, you're really on it. If you get 3 things done in a day, you are a rock star. And, before COVID, 10 things in a day was pretty much what, a lot of high achieving people were handling. It's just taking a lot of strength to continue on in the unknown. A lot of us are evaluating our professional choices. It's just such an interesting time. I think maybe why the cookbook spoke to me, because it feels so homey.
Good. Yeah. I and the nostalgic part too. I hope it resonates with people right now. I really do.
So it is Land of 10,000 Plates. It has been a pleasure to spend time with you, Patrice. Thank you everybody for joining us tonight. On Saturdays, we have our radio show called Weekly Dish. It's on from 9 to 11 on My Talk 107.1, or you can always find it as a podcast and download it on Google or on iTunes, wherever you find your podcast. Patrice, you've been a listener for like 12 years, I think.
Since the very first episode, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun food show. So if you like to hear more of this kind of talk about food and traditions and fun things, check it out and get Patrice's cookbook.
Yeah.
For holiday gift giving or for yourself.
That's right.
Thanks so much, ladies. It was just such a pleasure.
Thanks you so much. Everybody. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you to the Historical Society for hosting us tonight and the Minnesota Historical Society Press. It's been lovely. And everybody have a good night. And vote.
Thank you.